So sometimes I find myself obsessing about a particular cognitive function, and lately that function has been SI. As someone who is not an SI user, I'm just looking at them like, what is this? What are you doing? So I've been studying a lot lately about this function, and I think I have sort of finally grasped it, although, of course, my understanding of it will be biased from my SE external perspective. But this is the way that I understand it. So I've always heard that SI is forming impressions, but I never really understand, well, what does that mean to form impressions? And what I've gotten from it is that SI is taking all of their experiences, and they're much more affected internally by their experiences because they use those experiences to form a standard in their life for how things are and the way that things should be. So that you hear things like kids are very impressionable. Well, SI kids are super impressionable because that is like the formative time for SI when they're gathering all these experiences, gathering all the impressions for like how things are in the world. So like for them, looking at examples and having like looking up to role models is extremely important because that is setting the standard of like their world. So I see that SI users are extremely variable in that because they're so affected by their experience. So if an SI user grows up in, the city of Chicago, they're going to be very different than if they grow up in the country or grow up in like a hippie commune, because they're forming an impression of like, that is the standard for my life now. And there's like this couple that I see on Instagram all the time. They've gotten very popular. It's an American girl with an Italian guy. There are a few of these. And they're very much like the Ricardos, but they're living in America, and every skit they do, every episode on Instagram is him being like, this isn't the way it's done in Italy. It's not measuring up to his Italian standard, like the way that we drink coffee, like our pizza, whatever it is that he formed the standard of for the way it should be done in Italy, we are not doing it well enough here. So it's constantly like this comparison back to like my past and those standards that I set up for my impressions of how things should be. So that's what you're constantly seeing, is this like comparison back. I heard an SI user the other day talking about how like, oh, when we were growing up, we had the Power Rangers, and kids these days, they have a whole different set of Power Rangers. It's not the same. Like, and it's always like with a bias towards like the way it was in the past being better. And I talked to another one yesterday, and she said, I have that feeling about music, about like hip hop, like it's not as good today as it used to be. And it's with a constant bias towards like the way things used to be when I was forming impressions were better. And that's not saying that all things from the past are better. It's the ones that they formed concrete impressions of, even though their impressions are highly subjective and individual to them because it's an introverted, internally focused function. So what they're trying to do is to regulate the world to match those impressions that they have. They're trying to like maintain that same level, that same standard within their life. So if you hit on something that like tries to challenge or change one of those impressions, you're going to get pushback from them. Like, no, that's not the way things are. That's not the way things should be. So I've noticed because how can I say this? High SI users tend to over attribute the way they are by what experiences they have. They tend to be like, oh, well, I'm like this because I was raised like this. Like, oh, I do this because that's the way I grew up. Or I'm afraid of dogs because one time when I was little, I was bit by a dog. Bitten is more correct. And I think that this is kind of like a faulty logic, because they're missing a component. What they're doing is this input equals this output, but you can't say A equals C if A for somebody else equals F. So you're missing a component. They're over attributing to their nurture because of their nature. So it's really like, this happened to me, and because I have these cognitive functions, because I'm the type of person who is highly affected by their experiences and their environment, I have this output. So an example, like, one person says, I don't watch a lot of TV because when I grew up, my parents watched a lot of TV. Where somebody else says, I watch a lot of TV because my parents watched a lot of TV. You see what I mean? It's like you're missing a key element there. Either you want to break from it or you want to maintain it. So it's really A plus B equals C and A plus D equals F, which is maybe a very TI way of explaining SI. But yeah, they're affected by their experience because they are the type of person who is affected by their experience. And we think of SE as being the function of experiencing, of engaging with the world. But because it's an extroverted function, we are not so internally affected by it. And that's why SE is more said to be more adaptive to new environments. So SI users have more trouble finding a way out of their past, because they're trying to maintain, again, that level of homeostasis. And so they form this, but it's for better or worse in their life. So sometimes they can recognize it like, oh yeah, I do this thing because of this past, but breaking from it is very challenging for the SI user. And I also find that they tend to attribute their experiences universally. So I had an experience that left this impression, so this bad impression, I had a bad experience, so I'll never do that thing again. And if I see somebody else doing that thing, well, then they must be stupid, because then the SI users, just like everybody, we are all just slaves to our cognition. And we tend to think anybody who doesn't hold the same perspectives as we do, they must be stupid, because obviously you're seeing the world as I do, but you're saying this or you're doing this, so you must just be a stupid person, rather than, oh, you're seeing a completely different form of reality that I am not privy to through my limited cognitive view. So SI users, they talk a lot of common sense. That's a very easy way to spot an SI user. But they're connected sort of with a chain of the past. They have a very good sense of like where they came from, a very good sense of their place in the world and their family history. Like a high SI user who's from Chicago, they feel like very connected with that city and with that past. I really see it as like a chain to it. Whereas it's interesting that I've always said, like far before I was aware of type, that I feel like I was just placed onto the earth, like I have no past, I have no place, like an alien that was just dropped and like, oh, here I am now. And I have no sense of past. And I thought this is like some connection to the fact that I'm adopted. But now that I've explored that side and know a little bit about my past, I still feel, oh, well, that's interesting, but it bears no weight on who I am as a person. I have no connection to it. But when you take an SI user from their sense of place, from their sense of like their chain to who they are according to their past impressions and their family history and everything, you can sort of get this fish out of water story, like I don't know, like Crocodile Dundee, things aren't the same as I'm used to. And they'll try to re-engage with the past, with what they are used to in this new place, and it's just not fitting, and they're fumbling, and it's like a funny way to make a movie, But of course, like for SI users, it depends their relationship with it according to the place in their cognitive stack. So what I'm talking about, we really see most with the SI heroes, ISFJ and ISTJ. But like when we talk about SI child, with INTP and INFP, I see them being more playful with nostalgia. So this is where I see a lot of INFP hipsters that like to do things the old way. Like they have a super old camera, they wear clothes that look like they're from the 1800s or something, and an old type of bicycle, or only using vinyl because that's the way music was meant to be listened to, but they're playing with it in a childlike way. But SI is sort of like a time capsule as well. It holds on to and it preserves things from the past, so we can see every SI user doing this. And the ENTP and the ENFP have the hardest time with this when they're young, but as they get older, they kind of want to settle back into these very comfortable patterns, and they see the utility of their SI, which again is highly individual, highly dependent on what environment you grew up around and what you're comfortable with. Another thing I've noticed is that a word that really resonates with SI is legacy. So SI has a sense of timelessness and continuation. They feel very connected to their past. So when they have children, they want to continue that connection to the past for their kids. So setting up their legacy, like it's unfortunate that I've seen SI users get sold very easily by brands that use this key trigger word. So if you do have SI, be aware that you can easily be sold by this word. And is it really passing on to future generations what you want it to? But this is something that SI users really worry about. What kind of world are we leaving for future generations? What kind of world are we leaving for our children? And in the negative aspects, I can see that if an SI user has children that do not continue this legacy, they can feel like they sort of failed as parents, and they can lose their sense of legacy and timelessness. Like the movie Coco, he doesn't want to continue on the family tradition. So he has a lot of pushback from them, like, this is who we are, this is what we do, we make shoes, we don't talk about this thing. But yeah, I hope that this cleared up SI for some people out there. It certainly did for me to make these connections and to think about it in this way and finally clear up, what does it mean to form an impression? I hope that helped you. And if it did or did not, either way, drop a comment and let me know how you see SI, how you experience it as the user, because I'm aware that my view of it, my perspective, may not match what the SI user is feeling themselves. So I would love to hear how you see your SI. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. And of course, as always, download the Type Match app, a dating app that matches you with people who are compatible with your personality, so you don't have to spend your whole life trying to translate your mind to someone who doesn't understand.
Your personality is unique. It's hard to find someone that understands you. Try dating using personality type matching. Find out who you're compatible with using Myers-Briggs and Big 5 personality scores. Download Type Match and start dating by personality type compatibility today. Type Match, available on App Store and Play Store.